That this call is being recorded. I will now turn it over to Julio Figueroa.
Thank you, Brandon, and good morning and hello. Welcome to the Greater Coachella Valley Chamber of Commerce Town Hall meeting with Sheriff Chad Bianco. My name is Julio Figueroa, and I am the chair of the Chamber's Business Legislative Advocacy Committee, and I will be the host for this meeting today. As always, to start, we would like to thank our sponsors that make these events possible. This event is brought to you by our generous sponsors, Alpha Media, AT&T, Vertec Waste and Recycling, California Bank and Trust, City of Indian Wells, Desert Care Network, Desert Urgent Care, Gulf California Broadcasting, CBS Local 2, KESQ TV, KDFX, KCWQ, and KUNA FM TV, Fantasy Springs Resort Casino, Pueblo Viejo Restaurant, Mechanics Bank, NBC Palm Springs, Southern California Edison, Southern California Gas Company, State Farm Insurance, Carmen Contreras, Asher and Asher Consulting, and West Coast Cannabis. Our guest today is Sheriff Chad Bianco, representing the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. Chad Bianco was elected Sheriff, Coroner, and Public Administrator of Riverside County in 2018's general election. He is a 25-year veteran of the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. As Sheriff, he serves as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Riverside County. Sheriff Bianco commands California's second largest sheriff's department in the state and one of the largest and most progressive law enforcement agencies in the nation, supervising more than 3,600 personnel. Sheriff Bianco entered the Riverside County Sheriff's Department in 1993. He began his career in corrections at the Robert Presley Detention Center. He spent time working patrol and narcotics in the city of Lake Elsinore. Sheriff Bianco held supervisory management positions at the Jurupa Valley Station, Moreno Valley Police Department, the Larry D. Smith Correctional Facility, and most recently, the Hemet Station. Additionally, he served administrative assignments in internal affairs and corrections administration and planning. As the fourth sheriff of Riverside County, as the 14th sheriff of Riverside County, Sheriff Bianco also serves as sheriff, coroner, and public administrator. We will ask the sheriff to offer an update for all of us on the sheriff's department, which will be followed by a Q&A session. If you would like to ask a question, please post it in the chat room at any time during today's call. We will try to get to them as many as possible. Sheriff Bianco, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Did I unmute? It's saying it won't allow me to.
You're good.
Okay, good. Well, thank you, Julio. I appreciate the opportunity to come and address everyone. It's I guess if there's a good thing that is coming out of this COVID situation is that I'm able to do multiple meetings in one day, then it doesn't matter where they are. So I'm able to be in the Coachella Valley at 11 and somewhere else on the back here in Riverside by early afternoon. So I guess if something has to be nice, all of us trying to figure out technology and figuring out how we can make meetings better, that's definitely happening. And I'm glad that I can be able to be here with you guys this morning and address your questions, tell you a little bit about the Sheriff's Department, where we are, what we're expecting. And of course, I'm sure that the majority of people on here don't want to listen to me talk. They want to hear me answer your questions. So we'll get to that also. I just want to give you just a little update on the Sheriff's Department. Sheriff's Department health-wise, we're doing well. The department is in a position that we haven't been in a long time, probably even since I remember being on here. I'm in my 27th, going into 28 years now, and we're doing well. We're retaining employees. We are having a little bit of retirements that we didn't expect, where people are leaving the state. That is happening quite a bit since last June, as probably could be expected, but we didn't expect it. So we're able to hire behind them because of the COVID situation and the budget for this cycle of this budget cycle. All of the positions that we had open that we could have hired, that we did have the money for, were stopped. So everything was put on hold. We're not really in a hiring freeze, but we were put on hold to where we couldn't add any employees. So we're able to backfill. We just were not able to add the positions we thought we were going to get and be able to do some of the things with special teams that we really had planned on for this year. But we're hoping to move them into this year and still be able to make that happen. But we're doing well. Our patrol stations are nearly full. We still have some vacancies, but we're doing very, very well. We no longer have forced overtime where we were forcing employees to come in on their days off and work 4 days per week. That was a little taxing on families, a little taxing on them, and we're glad that we were able to eliminate that. We in your area, the Indio Jail, in the beginning with the COVID situation with our budget, if you paid attention to anything I was doing or the Board of Supervisors, you know that in the beginning of the budget cycle, it was not possible for me to open the jail. By them cutting our positions, we did not have the personnel to open the new jail, even though we opened, we took custody of it, if you will. And so I opened it as an intake facility only. And if an inmate was going to be, if a person was booked into jail and they were going to be housed, they were going to be kept overnight, we had to transfer them to one of our other 4 jails on this end of the county. And they were housed there and then transported back and forth to court. And the Indio jail was just kept as a book and release facility, basically. We have about 450 inmates in there right now. The capacity is 1,600. We are going to do everything we can to make sure we open that as fast as possible. But like always, it's a budget thing and it's a personnel issue on why we can't open it. We initially we were able to open it with overtime. So because we had plenty of people in, not plenty, but we were no longer forcing people in patrol to work overtime, we were able to move things around a little bit. There's always a position in our department, in our line of work, where people want to work overtime. So we just don't want to be in the position of forcing it. But able to open it up to people that want to work overtime, that's a completely different thing. And we were able to open the jail. We got 450 inmates in there. It seemed like it was going to work well for us in the beginning, but unfortunately what happened with the COVID situation was that the state prison system, California Department of Corrections, refused to accept any more prisoners. So every time someone is convicted for a crime that requires state prison, we are given an order that we are supposed to take them to a state prison and they become their property. Well, the state decided that they were just not going to take anymore. And so that burden was placed on the counties. So right now we have just short, it's like 985, we're just short of 1,000 inmates that are supposed to be in state prison that we are being forced to hold in our jail. So the problem that makes for us is that eliminates almost a third of our population that normally we would house our regular inmates, our new arrestees, the people that are sentenced to county jail for less than a year, or the people that are sentenced to county jail because of prison realignment and they don't go to prison, they go to county jail. Those types of inmates cannot be released. Only a judge can release those inmates. They're not subject to a federal court order that is imposed upon us anyway. And so with all of those state prisoners being housed in our jail, that eliminates a third of my jail population, inmate population, that is lacking in the first place. We don't have enough bed space for a county our size, especially when you compare it to any other county around us or a county of similar size. There isn't that many, but we're one of the largest in the country. But bed space wise, we're severely lacking. So by taking a third of that and making it state prisoners, that even makes it worse. So there was a highly publicized event it was highly publicized by the Desert Sun about where we were called into court. I was called into court by a local judge out in Indio because we released someone and the judge didn't want him released. He had $1 million bail and he had stolen some vehicles out in the desert and we had released him and he didn't show up for court and the judge was a little upset, so ordered me in there to explain why I released him. He didn't really like my answer, but unfortunately, it's a factual answer and it's a legal answer. It just wasn't something that he liked. We are at the point where we have to release people for property crimes because we just don't have the space. We can't release a state prison inmate. We can't release someone that is wanted for a murder or a serious crime against a person. So we're running the risk of releasing people that, while we know they're probably going to be a risk of not showing up in court. They're going to be a high risk of probably offending again. We have to daily monitor our population and determine, I hate the term the worst of the worst, but we really are at that point where we're releasing people that we know shouldn't be released, but we have no other choice. So we're doing everything we can with that. We're working with the state, with the governor's office to get them to start resuming the intake of state prison inmates. They're using the COVID situation to not. My personal opinion, and many opinion throughout the state, is that it's a political opinion. The governor made it very obvious and vocal. He was very vocal about wanting to reduce the prison population and close prisons. Well, he wasn't doing that until COVID hit. And then, quite frankly, I believe he used that as a political tool, take advantage of a bad situation, never let it go to waste. And he let people go left and right. 20,000 inmates he's released back into the custody or into our neighborhoods. And he did it by saying he had to release them because of COVID, and he didn't want them getting COVID. Once he released enough people and he had a prison that was empty, he closed that prison. The bad part about that is that prison will never be opened again. Our prisons are all old and they don't meet current regulations. So you would have to retrofit it. You would have to rebuild it basically. And we know that's never going to happen. So for all of the inmates that he releases, every time he can close a prison, he's going to. And by not taking these inmates into the state prison system, we've been told that there's roughly about 10,000 that are in county jails that are not going to state prison right now. And we're afraid that our legislatures or the governor are going to somehow try and take advantage of that and say, well, the counties are dealing with them anyway. We're just going to leave them there and we're not going to take them into the state prison system. And the counties can just handle it. And they're, what they say is, we'll give you money for them. Well, quite honestly, I don't want their money. I don't want the money to house their inmates. I want them to take their inmates so we can more manage our population here. And what we have for criminals that we're arresting, some of them need to be in jail. Some of them need to go to jail and they need to serve their time in jail. And the prison needs to manage their inmates the same as we are doing ours. We're doing a great job of it through this COVID situation. And I think they should maybe look to us to see the example, what the county jails have done, and them do the same. And, maybe they'll be a little bit better off. So that really is our only issue in corrections. We're coming up on budget season now. I think there's going to be some questions about our budget, and I'll save, what I'm going to say for that. But we're a little bit worried. All of us in the county, we know that we're suffering financially from the closures, from business closures. The downstream effect of that is how government is funded, is from all of those things. And so the funding that we are not going to get because of all the closures and the income taxes and the business taxes, the sales taxes, that's what makes us whole for the next year. And we obviously know that everyone is suffering, and the full extent of what we're going to realize for those cuts, we're not sure yet. And so as we go into our budget season, it's going to be I don't want to say it's going to be a battle, but it certainly is going to be probably a contentious budget cycle this year as everyone in government wants to maintain what they have. And then I'm going to go in there with the public safety issue and say, quite frankly, this is the role of government, is public safety. And all of the rest is fluff. When you can take care of infrastructure and take care of public safety, what government has left over, that's when they do their other things. So hopefully, that's going to be our argument, and it may work at least to stop us from too much of cuts. We're hoping to not take any. Just as far as our employees go, just talk a little bit about COVID, because there's a lot of bad information that's out there, that whether you read it in the press or whether you see it on social media about the extent of COVID in our department and in our inmate population. Right now, we have probably about 60, between 60 and 70. It varies day to day, but we're definitely on a downhill trend of employees that are out with COVID. And right now, as of this morning, we had 41 inmates. So we're doing extremely well. In the last, December, it increased just like the public did. Our employees got it more. It was more common to have people out sick, and we did see a lot of the inmates that were testing positive that were coming into our jails. And of course, they were, some of them may have brought it in, but we have a very extensive system set up to monitor and check our inmates. I think that at the peak for the winter, I think we were up to about 150, 160 inmates at one time were positive for COVID. We're down to 40 now. It was a very similar graph, if you want to call it that we experienced in the spring. We experienced it a little bit faster than the public did, and then we experienced our decline a little bit faster than the public did. So I'm actually hoping that what we're seeing in our employees and in the inmate population is going to duplicate what it did in the spring, and we're on the downhill slide. And I'm hoping that we're going to start realizing that as it relates to the public too. So keep our fingers crossed with that. Everything else, our department's doing well. Our morale is up. Our inmates, our employees are doing a fantastic job. Crime is unfortunately on a major increase. In the beginning of what we experienced with the initial lockdown of the state, where when they told us that everyone was going to die, and for that 2-week period everyone stayed home, we really did see a downward tick in crime for probably about 2 months. There was a reduction in reported crime and a severe reduction in proactive enforcement by not only the sheriff's department but all of our police agencies. And once everybody started getting somewhat back to normal, venturing out into public, we had the restrictions that were eased a little bit, then crime started really picking up. And unfortunately, especially violent crime is kind of like going through the roof. We're getting a lot of shootings, a lot of murders, stabbings, a lot of drug crime. Drug crimes are skyrocketing, and with that comes a lot of the violent crimes that go along with it. So our deputies are extremely busy. We're definitely making a lot of arrests, but morale is very, very high. They're happy to go out there and do what they're doing, and they especially in times, this has been a crazy year. 2019 was an unbelievably crazy year for law enforcement, but one of the things that I know that some of the questions coming up are going to address this a little bit, but one of the issues that we had in the beginning was what seemed like a nationwide trend of a negative opinion or a negative position taken against law enforcement. And I will say, every time I'm asked, I'm very vocal about this. We did not experience that here. We have experienced nothing but a vast majority of Riverside County residents have been unbelievably supportive of not only the sheriff's department, but our police departments. Of course, we get the few that are not. I honestly have gotten to the position, though, that we're never going to make them happy. But the deputies have experienced an overwhelming positive response when they're out in public. And that helps them too. That helps their morale. So what they're seeing on a national level and what may be experiencing in other states, we are definitely not. So I want to thank all of you business owners and residents, just regular residents. If you happen to be on here watching, I want to thank you for the positive response to our deputies. It certainly helps with morale and making them come back to work and come back to work happy, which makes for a better employee. So that's working out for us very well. One of the things that I just want to address, I don't know if it's going to be a question, but obviously we're in a time right now where we are experiencing a lot of turmoil, a lot of unrest. I can promise you that you will not experience here what we watched on TV in Washington. If you back it up several months, what you saw in other cities of buildings burning and police stations overrun and cars on fire in the street and things like that, we are not going to experience that here. Number one, because we don't have the residents that I believe would go for that are for that support that. And number two, a law enforcement response for Riverside County, what we showed in June, July, and August with the protests that we had there, we are not responding to those protests like other jurisdictions did. We're not going to let them have free reign. And then if or when it does go sideways and go to a violent type of a protest or a violent type of a riot, then us be behind the 8 ball and try and figure out how we're going to get in front of it. We'll be in front of it from the beginning. My position is I will, I may not like it, but I will die defending somebody's constitutional rights, whichever they are. Particularly our First Amendment rights. It's everyone's First Amendment right to voice your opinion, to have your peaceful protests. We draw a fine line between when it's a peaceful protest and when it turns to a violent one. And when it makes that turn, we will be in a position, I give you my word as a business community and law-abiding citizens in this county, that when it makes that turn from peaceful to not, we will be there and we will be able to stop it quickly so it doesn't affect your businesses, so it doesn't affect our neighborhoods, our homes. And we want to limit the amount of damage, of property damage, of loss of life, of injury as much as we can. And we believe, and we showed that it was successful to the point where the rest of law enforcement in the country started doing what we were doing. And if we stop it quick, it doesn't escalate and we don't have injuries and we don't have property damage. And while you still have the right to protest and you still have the right to voice your opinion, we'll let you do that as long as you remain peaceful in doing it and you're not violating somebody else's rights or property in your exercise of your rights. I don't want to go too much into that. I just want to promise you that we are very aware of situations that may be planned or may be coming up in our area, and we have plenty of resources that we will be able to make sure that everyone's safe if they choose to exercise that right. So with that said, we'll move on. And quite honestly, I want to thank everybody for their support of the Sheriff's Department. Even our Board of Supervisors, I want to thank them for what they have given to us, and they understand what we need to keep you safe and to provide the service, the level of service that our residents expect. And we're doing everything we can internally to cut costs, to redo how we do business so we can be more efficient. My goal, I don't want to go backward and necessarily take from our budget, because everyone knows we need more of a law enforcement response. But what I want to do is get to a point where we have streamlined things so much that I don't have to ask for more money. I can just use the resources that I'm given already, channel them differently, do them different, and make sure that our county is better taken care of. So with that, we'll go into questions. I'm sure there's probably a lot.
Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate the updates. Before I go into the pre-submitted questions that have been submitted by the chamber and our members, one question I do want to ask you: what can the chamber do and our business and our members do to help you maintain a quality of life for our businesses and our residents in the cities that you patrol out here in Coachella Valley?
Outstanding. And I get that asked a lot, and I'm glad you asked it. So, because I didn't touch on it, I had to answer this a lot in June of what you could do, what businesses could do. And you just have to pay attention. You just have to, you obviously care about your business. You care about what's going on there. A lot of what we have seen in the past couple of years in law enforcement is that people either are afraid to report or they don't want to report. And that's horrible. That's horrible for us. If you see something at your business or at even in your residence, your neighborhood business, your district, if you see something that looks out of place, it probably is. And that's something that we need to know about. You need to tell us if there's people that you believe are casing that aren't necessarily shopping or that aren't necessarily there for what you would consider normal traffic. And we need to look into them, and we need to see if they're there for some other reasons that may not be good. One thing that I would suggest for businesses is if you do not have an alarm, get an alarm. If you do not have cameras, please invest in cameras. The cameras that are up right now or that are available to the public or to businesses, they're relatively inexpensive. They are easy to set up. You can do them yourself. They're in the cloud. You don't even need the storage in your own systems. Some of them run off battery. Some of them run off solar. You don't even have to hardwire them. But that is unbelievable for us. If something does happen at your business, that we can now go back on and we can find whoever it was that victimized you. And also, any type of criminal activity is a crime of opportunity. If you make it difficult for a criminal, they're going to go somewhere where it's easier. And they know that they don't want to be caught on camera. They don't want to go around alarm systems. They don't want to be at a place where a door opens and an alarm goes off, because that attracts attention. So anything that a business can do to limit your vulnerability or what you appear to be vulnerable to a criminal, that helps us tremendously. Put cameras up, put signage up that says you have alarms. I know we want to be good businesses and we want to be good neighbors and we want to be good citizens and partners and everything else, but we also have a real problem in this country about conversation and just about talking to people. Ask, if they're in your store, if they're in your business, talk to them. Don't just let them roam, walk around aimlessly. If you think they're not there for the right reasons, ask them if they need help. Ask them if they're in the right place. Just don't be afraid to talk to people. And if something appears out of place, I can't emphasize this anymore. You have to call us. Even if you think it's minor, it may not be minor. And if we're able to just get a description or a picture, we may be looking for those people for a different crime. And, you may prevent your own store or your own business or your own home from being victimized if you're not afraid to report it. That's what we're here for. Every neighborhood is different. Every city is different. And that's how we approach it. Where you mentioned quality of life. Your quality of life, whether it's your business or your home, that's your quality of life at the time. And that's really what I believe we're here for, is to address those types of concerns. So I want you to be aware. I want you to get with your neighboring businesses. If you're if you're in a downtown position, or if you're on a street position where you have neighboring businesses, start getting to know them if you don't already, and look out for each other. We have to get back to a point where we don't operate in tunnel vision anymore, where if it doesn't concern me, I don't care. We need to be concerned about what's going on around us in our other stores too. So everyone can help each other.
All right. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you for those comments, and I appreciate that. And to our members, you heard the Sheriff. So whatever you can do to upgrade your security systems, equipment, and all the other advice that the Sheriff gave, please start working on that. And anything that you need from us at the Chamber, we can help as well. All right, Sheriff, we're going to go ahead and start with the pre-submitted questions that were sent to us by our members. Question number one, and you talked a lot about this in your opening comments regarding budget, but There's a well-documented tug of war, for lack of a better term, between the sheriff's department's office and the cities they serve when it comes to budget. For those who may not understand the dynamics outside of the news reports that pop up every year around budget time, can you explain why cities continue to see cost increases for safety budget?
Yes, our budget is a very large and dynamic part of county government, and it trickles down into the cities when those cities are contracting with us. So they're contracting for a service through the sheriff's department rather than have their own police departments. It doesn't matter what you're told or what you read. It is a well-known fact that contracting with the sheriff's department you are able to get more of a service for less money than if you had your own police department. The overheads, the liabilities, it just stands to reason that if you're sharing that amongst everyone, those costs go down rather than absorbing them on your own. And then the benefit that you get from the sheriff's department is not only do you have those deputies that are on the street that are actually working, but you have the rest of the 4,000 member organization that is available at really the drop of a hat. For instance, the contract cities that we take care of in the desert, when they had a potential of a protest / riot in their downtown area, you weren't relying on what you had available in your police department per se. We sent a couple hundred deputies out to the desert, to those places where we were able to better protect those business districts. And so it is a by far better deal to contract with the sheriff's department rather than have your own. It is by far cheaper. And the reason why people contract with sheriff's departments is because exactly that. It's because of cost. If you have more money than you know what to do with as a city, and you have more than enough to go around, and you want your own police department, that's a completely different story. If you want the best bang for your buck, then that is hands down the best choice is the sheriff's department. Now with budgets, about 93% of our budget is personnel costs. Those personnel costs are salaries, benefits, and unfortunately, especially in a California situation, everybody is aware of pension costs. And pension costs are a big driver right now as they're trying to get behind a deficit of what they say the pension system has and what that liability agencies have with the retirement system, with the PERS retirement. So the reason why budgets go up every year is basically of personnel costs. The cost of personnel go up every year. The cost of insuring employees goes up every year. The cost of salaries doesn't necessarily go up every year, but it goes up most years. Those are all controlled by contracts with labor unions and the Board of Supervisors. That would be no different than if a city had their own cost of a police department. You still have those contracts and those labor negotiations where you engage in to come up with some type of a contract, a working contract that deals with salary. And we're no different. The county is no different, where they are in those negotiations with Riverside Sheriff's Association, the Deputies Association, and our other with LIUNA and with SEIU, and all of that controls what we end up having to pay our employees. It's not based on what I want or what I say, it's what the labor unions agree to with the County Board of Supervisors. So for instance, the deputies in this last year, they received a contract, a 5-year contract where they're getting raises for the next, I think it's like a 4.5% raise for the next 5 years. Where that comes into play is we go backward, and if anyone remembers or was paying attention to the department, we were losing employees left and right. The morale was horrible. A lot of it is pay, not all of it, but a lot of it is pay, where we were losing a lot of employees We would train them, we would hire them, we would send them to the jail, or we would send them on patrol. And then they would take all of that training and that certificate they get for now being a law enforcement officer, and then they would lateral over to a police agency that was paying them more. And that police agency benefits because they don't have to go through the year and a half of training. And then they just take on a full-fledged officer, and they save a lot of money on the front end for the training aspect, where we're wasting it all because we paid for the training of that employee, and then they went to a police department where they were making more money. And what we found out is the sheriff's department, the deputies, were the lowest paid police officers in Southern California. So the Board of Supervisors did give them an increase, a pay increase. They didn't make them the highest paid, but they're certainly not the lowest. I think they're middle to upper middle as far as every other agency around. But that's certainly going to help us with retention. Now, what that does, though, is just like any other government agency or any other job, really, even a private, if you have employees that increase in raises every year, that increases the cost. So the problem in the past has been that we, as the sheriff's department, were never clear on where that cost came from. And then we also contributed a lot to the increase every year because we weren't maintaining the level of service that we should have been maintaining in the county areas. And how it works, to be really, really simple, is there's a pie. And if you want to find out how much the cost of a deputy is, you take the total cost of operating divided by the number of deputies. Well, if we were underinflated over here and we were not keeping up the deputies, then that denominator that you're dividing that cost by is less and less and less. If the county was increasing their staffing levels to where they should have been, then the cost for contract cities go down. So that's basically what we were able to accomplish, to where we've gotten it to it's a real cost for the cities, and we're able to predict with somewhat relative accuracy. We're able to predict from year to year what that increase is going to be, because we know what to anticipate the cost of employment, the cost of wages is going to be. And so what we've been able to do with the cities in the last couple of years is give them a little bit more balanced, a little bit more even projection of what their cost is going to be. The only thing that we're not in control of is pensions. And so when the state bills the county for pension liability, then the county has to recuperate that from our contract cities, because those employees are assigned to those contract cities. That's naturally where it comes from. And that's a big driver in the cost of doing business, basically, for law enforcement. So we've been pretty good. We're very open with all of our city managers where that hasn't been in the past. We're trying to, they know that we're not gouging them in some way. We're not making money off of them. The costs really are the costs, and we're laying it all out in front of them, and we're working with them on ways to save money in their city. So while we naturally, as long as they're in this contract for the next 5 years, we will see a nominal increase in the cost of doing business every year, because the pay increases are going up. But as far as business goes for the county and even for cities, those types of increases are normal. There's a normal, 3 to 5%, roughly around there, increase in city budgets every year. And those are acceptable increases. So we're not outside that range anymore to where it was raising red flags. So now we're able to work with the cities. I wouldn't consider them red flags anymore. It's just, it's a reality of where our budget sits and how we're going to make it better for the cities. That's a long answer, but it's a very complicated process. We're trying to make it as easy and simple to understand for the cities, and giving them an input of how we can make it better for them.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you for those comments. I do have a follow-up on regarding the retainment of deputies. Is there anything in the contract right now that allows the agency to hold on to that deputy right after training to keep, in order to fulfill the investment you made in the training, or can they leave as soon as they become licensed?
They can leave really at any time.
Okay.
The only thing legally, I mean, we looked at that as being an option, And legally, the advice was that if we were offering an incentive for them to come here, then you can get into a contract that keeps them here. But just the normal hiring process, we weren't. Our advice was that you're not really allowed to do that, and they're basically telling us don't even venture down that path unless you're incentivizing someone to come. Then you can bind them into a contract for so many years.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Next question. Again, pre-submitted from our members. There is a very public effort to defund police or reform police. I know we believe we've heard that over the last year. Whatever the term is used, as a career law enforcement professional, in your opinion, what could and should be done to address modern policing, and what should not be done?
Well, I think that unfortunately, for whatever reason they chose to fund the police and then got behind that type of a movement, I would hope that anyone with any type of common sense would see or hear or realize that that is that's a non-starter, that we are in a yearly battle to increase funding so we can get more police officers out there, so we can have better training. The problem with defunding a law enforcement agency, and I have to, when I go to the board and when I argue why I need a certain amount of money and please don't cut me. If you're going to cut law enforcement, the first thing that gets cut is the peripherals. We're not going to just send all the cops home, lay off all the cops. People, our residents, our business owners are begging us for more service. They want more police officers. They need more police officers. The response times are down because there's not enough cops coming to help us. So if we don't have enough people to address the concerns that we already have, laying them off and sending them home is not going to be the answer. So the peripherals are what has to be cut. You have to cut training budgets. You have to cut, and at the same time, we're saying that we need more training. We need to train. We obviously do. We know that training is huge. I think when you get on this defund the police was a national movement. And unfortunately for California, I'll stick up for the entire state right now. What we saw and what we hear in the news and we read in articles about things that are happening in other states, they don't happen here. California has been unbelievably progressive, if you will, in the route that they have taken with law enforcement and mandatory training and the things that we require of our officers and the laws that we have on our books already that prevent some of the things that this whole defend the police movement was even trying to accomplish. It was okay in some other states, and I believe it was needed in some other states. But when you apply that to California, and if you blindly jump on that bandwagon and you really don't even know what California law enforcement is or what we represent or what we try and do, then it falls on deaf ears, and you're losing what we may have been trying to accomplish in the first place, because it's not money. If you're cutting money, if you listen to the board of supervisors, they were saying take the money from the police department and give it to social programs. Well, number one, that's not how government works. That's not what our government is designed for. And some of the argument was, take it from the police and give it to the board of supervisors should not give me money and they should give it to schools. Well, that's someone that has no idea where the funding for schools even comes from, that the board doesn't control funding for schools. That's a state system. And that's the state is who gives schools money, and where that money comes from is completely separate from law enforcement, and they don't intermix. So it's not a good argument. It's one thing to say we have to be more efficient and we have to maybe have some type of police reform and we have to better serve our community. Those are obvious things that we need to talk about and address. But a movement to defund police and to take money away from law enforcement agencies is going to be a recipe for disaster. We do very well in California, and the last thing we want is anarchy and violence in the streets with no one to respond to that.
Thank you, Sheriff. Again, one thing I always appreciate my conversations with you is that you're always transparent and you speak from the heart. So I do appreciate that in your comments. All right, next pre-submitted question is, we have seen businesses and government buildings around the country be vulnerable to peaceful protest that quickly escalates to significant damage being perpetrated by lawless crowds. And you talked about this also in your opening comments, which includes vandalization and theft, most recently in our own capital. To many in the business community, it seems that our businesses are often viewed as acceptable collateral damage in these instances. What can be done to better protect our business districts and government infrastructure and to ensure peaceful protests remain that peaceful?
I think a lot of that falls on me, what we can do to make sure that they remain peaceful. And I think that that means that I have to continue doing what I did in June. I want to, I mean, this is a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and this is about business owners, and this is about, that's what we're talking about right now. And I can tell you that I do not consider you and your businesses as collateral damage. And I believe that not only your persons, but your property, I am supposed to be protecting that. And when we had the situation last June rolling into Riverside, that was my concern. My concern wasn't about injury to people. I mean, we don't want that at all. We don't want protesters being injured, and I don't want law enforcement officers being injured, or the people that live downtown or work downtown. But what our concern was the businesses that are downtown. It was the courthouse. It was the DA's office. It was the public defender's building. It was my offices. It was the police departments. It was the county buildings. It was the Mission Inn. It was all of the shops that are around the Mission Inn and in our downtown area. And if we allowed the type of behavior that we saw on TV to just go unchecked, we were going to have the same outcome. And we did not approach it like that. And I can tell you, as we move forward, as long as I'm the sheriff here, I can tell you that every response to any protest will be the same. I will protect your right to protest all day long, but I will also be right there to stop it when it's no longer peaceful, and we will not let it progress to where businesses are being damaged and businesses are being looted and buildings are being burned and cars being burned and people being hurt. We have enough resources and enough intelligence working on these types of things that we know how many people we need there, and we're not going to be caught behind the 8 ball. We don't want it to be where we're preventing any protests or preventing any marches, but be prepared to see us marching along with you and making sure that we're there, not to stop you, but to make sure, if you're protesting, but to make sure that it doesn't go sideways. And so when you see us there in your businesses, know that that's what we're there for. We're there to protect the protesters, the businesses, the residents there, the business patrons there. You certainly, as far as what I'm concerned, and I'll speak on behalf of all of our police chiefs in this county, you are our major concern, and we don't want you to think that that we consider you collateral damage. You're our priority.
And just to add to that, Sheriff, is there anything that the agency or any of your partnerships with community and social organizations, is there any work being done there to that when a protest does come up, you have that relationship already engaged with some of those organizations in the community?
Yes, we had with what we had going on in the fall and what we have moving forward, we were able to identify those organizations, those organizers, and this is not a confrontational relationship. This is, how can we, law enforcement, work with you, and how can you work with us to make sure that you're successful in the mission that you have of your protest, and we're able to keep everybody safe and everything in a peaceful manner. And what we found here is that overwhelmingly the response from these organizers, they wanted us there. They wanted us to help them. They were giving us information of the people they were identifying that were there with them, but not with them. They knew who were going to be the problem children, if you will, that were probably going to cause problems as the day or the night progressed. And they didn't want that to happen. And so they would identify them for us, or we would identify them together, and we would separate them. We would make sure that they were gone, or the organizers would say, okay, we're done now. We were able to accomplish what we did, and we're all leaving. Anybody that stays is not part of our organization. And that happened multiple times. So we are working very, very closely with organizers. If you are an organizer and you want to reach out to us, this is not a confrontational relationship. We want you to protest, but we also want you to abide by laws, and we want you to take into consideration the rights and the responsibilities of other people, and how can we make that all work together.
Thank you, Sheriff. And then as those discussions happen with these organizations, if you believe that the business community can be helpful in that, please feel free to reach out to us to inject our point of view in those discussions as well.
Absolutely.
All right, next question. You received a good bit of national attention for expressing your opinions and views on current local and national affairs. You can probably understand how some in the local community may be put off by this. The sheriff loves the spotlight, as it's been quoted, the line of criticism. Can you address your role in the media and why you feel it is A, important to do, and B, a part of your job?
Yeah, number one, being attacked by someone, verbally, especially social media and everything else, and saying that I love the limelight, and that's going to happen. Number one, if anyone ever says that and you hear it, I would hope you would stand right up and tell them, obviously, you don't know him and have no idea who he is. Because personally, if I had my way, I would be on a mountaintop somewhere by myself, maybe my wife, and no one else around. I'm perfectly fine not talking to anyone, not seeing anyone. I enjoy my privacy. I enjoy my family's privacy. I enjoy my quiet time. Saying that I'm doing this for the spotlight or because I want to be famous is a way that we're this culture that we're in with social media, especially, is, that's how you attack someone. You attack someone by, he's only doing it because he's a racist, or he just wants a spotlight. It can't be real. There's got to be some other reason why he's doing it. And you try and take away from what's really being said, what's really happening, and turning into something else. So I certainly couldn't care less about publicity or spotlight. It's an annoyance, to be quite honest. I've got a job to do, and having a spotlight on me is a hindrance. It's not a help. So I certainly am not doing it for that. Before any of this happened, when I took over as the sheriff, I promised that I would be the most transparent law enforcement agency in the country, the most transparent sheriff, the most honest sheriff as far as dealing with the public and the media. I think I see a couple of media that are on this call right now. I haven't made it a secret that I believe a lot of the problems that we're having right now in our relationships is caused by the media. The media tells us only what they want to tell us. I don't believe that we have unbiased reporting anymore. I told I was talking to my son this morning. He's back east. He's in the Army, but he's just in a different place. And he's telling me about things that are happening there, about what's happening here. And we were having this conversation, and we're at a point right now where you can't believe anything you read or anything that you see on TV, because every news organization, every media organization has a slant one way or the other. And that's how they report. There's no unbiased reporting. There's no saying both sides. There's no factual. It's all opinion-based, and opinion is turning to fact. So what I did in the very beginning is say that I was not going to rely on the media twisting my words, reporting what they wanted to report. And we would be very, very vocal. We would be very, very open. We would address people with social media. We would address people with press conferences or media releases that I put out with videos. And we started doing those way before this happened. But everybody likes to say I'm only doing it because of this. This is just how we're getting the information out. So nothing's twisted. What I found early on, or especially during the campaign, is one sentence is taken from a 5-minute conversation and the context is lost. So if I'm going to rely on media relaying a context of something that we're doing or an investigation or an incident that happened, it's not going to happen unless I do it myself. So that's why we're doing the videos. That's why we're far more open than anyone's ever been. It's working out good for us. I'm not going to say that we have a better relationship with the media, because I don't think they like what I'm doing. And sometimes, that being honest about it, they may not want to hear you be honest about it, because that's not fitting an agenda, or it's not fitting an emotion, and it's not fitting what they believe it is. So we'll put factual information out. The videos that I put out are exactly what's going on in the department, exactly what we're doing, moving forward. And there's not going to be any type of spin one way or the other on it. So it's unfortunate that some people do feel that way. But it's obvious they don't know me, because it's that is completely goes against everything that I believe or stand for.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you for your candid comments on that question. I'll remind everybody in the audience, if you do have a question, please send it into the chat room, and Brandon will be monitoring that, so when we can ask it. All right, Sheriff, next question. It's another budget question from one of our members. Riverside County is likely to come under significant financial stress over the months and years ahead as the fallout from our economic shutdown continues to reverberate throughout the economy. What are you seeing in the near future that county's ability to provide for public safety? And should we be concerned about budget cuts and other threats to the availability of public safety?
Well, I always think we have to be concerned about those cuts, especially me as the head of the organization. And every year when I come into trying to figure out what I need for the next year, I obviously have to be concerned about budget cuts. And we all know, I mentioned this in the beginning, that these lockdowns that we're under, and our businesses not working, our employees not working, the money that is funding government is not going to be there. We have been lucky so far, and so far this year, the county was able to get a lot of federal money through the CARES Act because of COVID, to make up for some of the things that we lost. But that money is gone. That was a 2019 thing. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. I hope that I hope that they keep going and they realize that there could be an issue. But there's going to be some tough discussions coming up with myself, with the county, and with other department heads in the county. I unfortunately think that the Board of Supervisors are going to have to make some serious hard decisions on what priorities should be, and where they really feel public safety falls in that, whether is public safety the important thing, or is social programs. And I think it's going to come to a head somewhere around June, when we really figure out what our totals from last year and what our losses are really going to be.
Okay. Thanks, Sheriff. All right. Another question, again, sent from our members. Speaking on the shutdowns, it is no secret you're not a fan of some of the efforts being taken to mitigate the current COVID-19 pandemic. You have been labeled everything from a hero defending the rights of citizens to a guy who doesn't care about public health. In your own words, explain your reasons for taking some of the actions or positions you have chosen related to lockdowns, curfews, etc. And I know that the department has opened up vaccines. I'll start. Have you had your vaccine? Are you planning to get your vaccine? And how about your folks in your department?
We had to take an internal poll to see what we were going to need for the department, and it was a 45% said that they plan on taking the vaccine. So that's how we were generating our numbers. Personally, I'm not. And I believe that's a personal situation. That's a personal I mean, do you take it or do you not? That's up to each individual personally. I'm not going to criticize anybody for taking it. And I think it's very telling of a person that criticizes me for saying I'm not going to take it. But that's a whole nother topic. This situation with the lockdowns has obviously garnered a lot of attention, a lot of national attention. And I, being a vocal person about it, and because I was making those videos for our residents here in Riverside County, it took off, and it took a life of its own, and it resonated throughout the rest of the country, and it resonated with a lot of other law enforcement officers that were, mind you, I mean, I hope everyone realizes this: there is no one that's enforcing these orders. There is no law enforcement agency in California that are enforcing these the governor's orders. There are some cities that are doing a little bit more than others, especially in the desert cities. But I became the poster child to hate. And it was because I said that I wasn't going to, and I was vocal about not doing it and very adamant about not doing it for good reason. I became the person that it was easy just to blame me for everything. I've been told that I've caused all the deaths in the county. I'm responsible for all the hospitalizations. I'm responsible for the overcrowding. And it's unfortunate that people are doing that, even have a voice in media, because it's so uninformed and it's so irresponsible. But it's something that I guess if you take the good with the bad that comes from that video, and the bad is going to be projected to me, and it's going to be my fault. Number one, because people don't want to assume responsibility for their own actions and their own behaviors. As it falls on these orders, I don't know if I've taken, there are certain sheriffs and there are certain law enforcement officers that have taken the position that it's a constitutional violation to shut a business. The government cannot control, they cannot close a business. We have certain fundamental God-given rights that were unalienable rights that we had before the Constitution, and the Constitution protects those rights in addition to some others. And that is, the right to make a living, the right to, America. People come to America because it's a land of opportunity, because government does not take away that opportunity. And there are sheriffs that argue that government is taking away that opportunity if you're closing a business and you're going to decide which business is open and which business is not, and which members of the public can go out and which members they can't. There are people that are taking that constitutional side. That goes into my decision a little bit, but to me, it's more of a common sense. I sat through these meetings from the very beginning. It's not like I'm operating in a silo. I've been in the meetings with the health department. I've been in the meetings with the hospitals. And when you look at statistics and you look at facts and you look at what is really happening, and you got to remember, I'm a cop. I don't deal, unfortunately, for some people, I don't necessarily deal in emotion. I deal in facts. Everything is about facts. Is it against the law or is it not? Is it a lie or is it the truth? And that's how we operate, and we operate with solutions. And so for this, telling me to be the arm of closing down businesses, in the beginning, it was arresting people without masks. It was closing down their businesses, forcing a healthy person to stay inside their homes. I could not take away what is our normal job in law enforcement of fighting crime, arresting criminals, protecting people's life and liberty and property from real criminals 24/7. That's what we do. I was being expected to take away those personnel and direct them somewhere else. So the same people that were telling me that I had to release all the people from jail because they may get COVID are the ones telling me to arrest everybody for opening their businesses and not wearing a mask and put them in jail because they may get COVID. Nothing made sense. And so it's certainly not the same, but it's against the law to run a stop sign. It would be just flat out dishonest if anyone said that everyone that runs a stop sign is arrested. There are more people that are given warnings than are given actual citations for breaking the law, whether it be any law other than a felony against a person. We don't really, you get no leeway when it comes to law enforcement for that. But for infractions, for misdemeanors, it's just like your kids. Punishment is what changes behavior. So if behavior can be changed without punishment, that's really what our goal as a parent is. And it's no different as a law enforcement officer. If I pull somebody over and their excuse for running the stop sign was they bent over to pick up the coffee that they dropped, or they just weren't paying attention and they didn't notice it, or they thought they stopped, but they really didn't, they rolled through it. I can educate them and say, look, you did, look, I have you on this video. You did roll through it. Please stop. And they promise to stop. Then that's a success. I don't need to ticket them. I don't need to arrest them. It's no different than this. We took an approach of education that was, look, these are the orders. There's potential problem for this criminally or civilly if you're going to violate it, but we want you to do the right thing. We want you to be responsible. And if someone's being responsible, why would I want to make them a criminal? What we found with businesses, and some of you are probably on here, you spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to make your businesses, especially our restaurants, to make them customer friendly, to make them customer safe, to social distance, to with barriers and distances and reducing your capacities. And so to say, when that's what they wanted in the beginning, when that's what the government said they wanted in the beginning, and you did it, and then they change the goalposts and say, no, that doesn't count anymore, we're going to shut you down anyway. I don't believe that that's law enforcement's role. There's plenty of different places in government where they can come in and enforce their own rules. It's not a mandate that I am mandated to do this because the governor said so. A lot of people don't understand what they elected me for. I elected them not only to keep their businesses and their property and their livelihood safe, but I did get elected to safeguard them from constitutional violations and from their constitutional rights being stepped on. And quite honestly, I don't answer to the governor, and I don't care if the governor is Republican, Democrat, Independent, or some other thing that comes out, Green Party. I really don't care who they are. I don't answer to them. I answer to the public, and I answer to the Constitution. So, when people are blaming me for them getting sick because they were unhealthy to begin with, is that fair to me? Probably not. I've probably been a little bit quiet and not vocal when it comes to accepting that criticism of me causing all of the deaths. When you've got to take a little bit of personal responsibility. I have friends and I have family that have not come out of their house since March. And I will tell you this, they have almost a zero chance of getting the virus. None of them have got the virus, and they have a zero chance almost of contracting this virus because they're taking the personal responsibility on themselves, that they believe that they're either older or they have health concerns that this virus may cause them problems. And so they're taking the personal responsibility of ensuring that they don't get it. If I came down with the virus and got sick, Julio, could I look at you right now and say, it's your fault that I got sick because I saw you 3 weeks ago not wearing a mask? I mean, that's irresponsible. It lacks common sense, and it's just not right. If I get this virus, number one, it's a virus, and we're not going to protect ourselves from it no matter what. But we can limit our exposure to it. I can limit my exposure to it, but I can't limit your exposure to it. If you get exposed, it was your fault for the exposure. It wasn't my fault for the exposure. So I made myself an easy target, and I'll take that. And they can blame me for someone dying. One of the things that I get right now is I have people that are obviously activists that are against me, that are going out in public and they'll post on social media that, look at, I'm not doing anything. There's there's too many people in this business, or this business isn't supposed to be open, or these people are walking down the street and none of them have masks on. And well, my answer to them is, well, if you're afraid of contracting the virus, why are you there? You're exposing yourself. So take a little bit of personal responsibility. We all know this virus is serious. We know it's serious because it's affecting certain people with death. I mean, we know that this virus is causing death. We lost 2 deputies. It's an insult to me if anyone says that I don't consider it serious, because I had to sit with these families as they went through that process of losing their loved one, that we lost a family member in our family. And we had to go through that in a situation where we couldn't even mourn their deaths. So we know what people are going through, and I know what people are going through, but there has to be a personal responsibility factor that gets put into this that is being completely ignored. What I want to say to everyone is, I don't believe the government is doing anything to stop this. I don't believe they're doing what they should be. They identified in March that December was going to be far worse than the spring. They told us it was going to be far worse. What did they do to protect us? They didn't do anything. Did the government come in? Did they add all of this ICU space that they knew they were going to need? Did they give all the hospitals the tools that they needed? No. They knew it was going to be a problem and they did nothing. So don't put it back on me and say it's my fault for not doing this order when nobody else enforced the order, including other states that had nothing like we have here, that have either the same or better outcomes. But the places that were not enforcing these lockdown orders and these distancing orders, there was no one worse. They may have been the same because the nature of a virus, but some were even better. Was it the luck of the draw? Was it a little bit more responsibility? Maybe, I don't know, but it certainly wasn't my fault, or it wasn't another sheriff in another state or another governor in another state because they didn't have a lockdown order. It's a virus. It's a serious virus we need to be concerned about, but maybe rather than blame everybody else for it, or hopefully put the blame on somebody or use it as an agenda driven item, if the governor was looking for a lot of places to give away money, it should have been to hospitals to increase ICU beds in that 8-month period that we knew it was going to happen. No one cares. I haven't seen it reported once in the media that every year our hospitals are overrun from November to February, and that our ICU beds are completely occupied in some of those years. They're just making it a bigger deal right now. It's almost like a fear factor. So I think it goes with that, what I mentioned earlier about it's hard to believe anything we see or read anymore, because if you look somewhere else, you get another version of facts, or you get another version of statistics or numbers that tell you something completely different. And one of the things that I was hit kind of hard on in social media and even with newspaper articles was that I made a comment that because it is such a divided response between the medical community of whether or not masks work, or whether or not lockdowns work, or whether or not, whatever the case may be, because it was so divided, how could I just automatically go arrest everybody that was violating this order when the medical community is so divided? And everyone attacked me saying, it's not divided, I'm making it up. Well, we all know that's not true, because we're getting results from the hospitals right now that only 40% of nurses and doctors are taking the vaccination. So, what does that tell you? There is a divide. There is a different opinion. There is a lot of people out there that believe that it's their responsibility to keep themselves safe. And, this is a virus that affects your immune system and your respiratory system. Why was there not a major push telling everybody, giving everybody, 9 months leeway to eat healthier, lose some weight, because we know that if you have a weight problem, an overweight problem, this is going to affect you worse. Why were those real health issues not mentioned back in March, and they still haven't been mentioned? Our answer to everything is, we'll wait for a vaccine, wait for a vaccine. I don't believe that's the answer. We have to a little bit of personal responsibility, and unfortunately, I guess I'll be the target of the people that don't want to accept that responsibility.
Sheriff, again, I can't say it more about your honesty in your comments to all the questions that we received pre-submitted by our members. So Thank you, answering candidly about how you feel and what's going on with your agency. I'm going to now defer to Brandon to see if he can provide some questions that were sent to the chat room. Brandon, do we have anything out there in the chat room that you could ask the sheriff, please?
We do. We have a couple that were emailed to us a little late as well. And if we don't ask one of your questions, we were trying to filter out ones we already felt were answered. But we do have a handful. The
Okay.
first one, Sheriff, is we've heard of businesses, mostly big box chains, that have chosen to simply not report crimes within their stores, like shoplifting. The thought process is it's just not worth it. What would you say to a business taking that approach?
Unfortunately, we've seen that as law enforcement officers in the last couple of years, not just in recent times. Businesses are taking that into consideration, where they've built into their business model an acceptable loss from theft. And the bigger the business, the bigger that loss is acceptable. And we know that crimes don't get reported. We know that there's a criminal element that are taking advantage of those situations, and they're not going to just the box stores. They may be going to the box stores, the bigger ones once in a while, but they're going into our mom and pop stores, also into our smaller stores. And maybe we could have prevented that had those other stores told us every time they were coming in there. The first time we may not be able to keep them in custody, but if we've arrested them 4, 5, 6, 7 times for the same thing, that's a reason for a judge to say, okay, that's enough. This is a pattern of behavior where rehab is not going to work. You're now going to have to pay for your consequences for what you're doing. We can't combat something if we don't know it's happening. In law enforcement, everything that we do is stat driven. When we try and find crime trends, or we try and find hot spots of crime, it's based on our calls for service. And we base it on calls for service over a year, over a month, over a week, and sometimes over an hour. And if we're not getting those calls reported to us, we can't direct resources to make sure that that problem is fixed, or that we're able to solve that for that business or for that community. So it does everyone a disservice if you're not going to report a crime. And some of those businesses, they don't want, there's a potential of someone's going to have to be a victim, and someone's going to have to go to court to testify in the slight chance it goes to a trial. And businesses don't want to pay their employees for that purpose. And so they say it's better to just not do it. And unfortunately, that's the wrong thing to do. It's telling criminals that you have carte blanche to do whatever you want, and they don't care.
Thank you. Next question is what are the consequences for deputies not wearing masks at all? They've seen them at drive-throughs without masks, and they feel it's inappropriate and disrespectful to staff. So we have a policy. Our policy right now is that you should wear a mask, knowing that there are instances where it is not practical, it's not responsible for us to have a mask on. So if, for instance, if we have deputies that are going to a call for service, the chances of the reason why we're there are because a crime was either committed and someone's going to be arrested, or there's some type of a disturbance that has gotten to the point where now we have to go in there and resolve it. When that happens, there is the very high probability that someone's going to be arrested, and especially because of social media, of media, of a culture that we're in right now, it's almost popular to resist arrest, to confront law enforcement, to go against them, to provoke them into something. And so we know that, number one, we're going to win. It is our job to enforce the law, to enforce these situations. We're not there to tie. We're not there to to sit there for hours and hours and hours. We're there to resolve a situation that may result in someone going to jail. To think that a mask is going to protect us while we're wrestling with someone, fighting with someone, they're not wearing a mask, whatever the case may be. It's like, come on. It's not realistic. We're going to be exposed no matter what. That mask is not going to help. Our deputies are tested regularly. We don't want someone sick being at work. We have precautions to keep our sick deputies away from work and identify them before they go to work, because the reality of my job is I don't get to stay home. If there's a state lockdown order, we don't get to stay home. We have to come out and do the job 24/7. So what we have to do to minimize the loss of sick leave, the loss of our employees to sick leave, is make sure that we're not coming to work sick. So you can probably be assured that if a deputy is in a car, is out doing work, we know that they don't have this virus. Now, yes, they could be asymptomatic and they could be spreading the virus, but now we go back to that whole medical uncertainty of doctors don't even know if an asymptomatic person can transmit the disease. Some people say yes, some doctors say no, some doctors say yes. Driving around, all of our deputies are by themselves in cars. Honestly, if you're a person that believes that mask is protecting you in your own car while you're driving by yourself, I don't know what you think you're protecting yourself from. I would certainly say, if we're going to make deputies wear masks, I will never tell them that they have to wear a mask in their car. If they go up to a drive up, should they be wearing a mask? Maybe. There's a social distancing there anyway, so there's no one they're not transmitting any type of virus in those situations, and statistics show that that's not where it's being transmitted anyway. It's unfortunate that people believe that, and that they're saying that they want to point out that a deputy's responsible or a deputy's disrespectful because they don't have a mask on. I don't know. There really isn't anything for me to say to that. There's nothing I can say to make them feel better unless we locked everybody down and we had martial law, and then they would complain about something about that. So deputies are trying to be responsible, but the reality is they can't talk into a microphone with a mask on and expect to be heard over the radio. If we want to address someone and get our commands and our orders relayed to them, we don't want a mask barrier being there. You all know, if you have masks on, it's hard to understand people. If you're standing right there talking normal, if you're elevating your voice, it makes it even harder. And we unfortunately, in law enforcement, we have a job to do that we're doing it 24/7, and we don't have the luxury of staying home. And I apologize for you thinking that's offensive for a deputy to not wear a mask. We'll have to agree to disagree. I don't think it's offensive.
Thank you. Do you think the homeless situation is getting worse in Riverside County? And do you think that the tiny houses will help with our homeless situation?
Homeless situation is not a new experience. It's something that we've been experiencing increasingly all over the country, particularly in California. We've been experiencing exponentially every year since the implementation of Prop 4757 and AB 109. There's a direct correlation with drug use and homelessness and mental illness that we're experiencing out there. And then when the state passes laws that make it a crime for a law enforcement officer to even address the homeless issue, we're running into a situation where we're almost encouraging it. We can't get them help for narcotic addiction. We can't get them help for alcohol addiction. We can't get them medical care for mental health issues. And it just keeps going on and on and on. We're trying to do our absolute best, working with our county hospital, our UHS, and the sheriff's department, And the mental aspect of that is doing everything we can to work together to address our homeless issues, where we're not sending just deputies out there anymore. We have clinicians that ride with deputies now, and we're trying to address the mental health part of the homelessness issue and see if we can get them help mentally, get them back on their feet with family, reunite them with family that can help them, provide them a better environment, or if we can get them into local shelters and local housing. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the tiny houses and offering homeless houses and the homeless people free living places. We do that now, and in our line of work, they don't want them. They don't want to abide by rules. If we're going to give them a place to stay, that they can do their drugs, they can do their alcohol, they can harm other people, they can steal other people's stuff, they can, we don't require them to abide by the law. We just give them a house. Well, of course they're going to live there, and they're going to trash it just like they do their shacks that they live in, their homemade places that they live in. But the people that we are identifying that want help, we're getting them help. We're able to place them in homes. We're able to provide them county assistance. We're able to provide them nonprofit assistance. I don't believe it's a give them housing issue. I think it's a mental health and a drug issue. That's what we have to combat to get a hold on the horrible homelessness issue that we have right now.
Thank you. Where can someone find up-to-date statistics about the rise in crime rates?
Those are available on any state website that deals with crime, with federal. The FBI has lots of up-to-date things. We put them out periodically. We're not doing it on a daily basis, trying to come up with daily, graphs and things like that. It's an independent situation for each area. As an overall department or as an overall city, we do them half yearly. Definitely yearly, but half yearly, just to get a guide of where we think we're going if there's major issues. It almost comes down to a personnel issue where we're not putting the people resources into sitting and compiling all of those statistics and putting them into a graph or something for everyone to see. We do them individually on certain neighborhoods. We can do it individually, but we're still sticking with the half yearly and yearly crime stats that we normally publish on our website or on state websites or even on national FBI DOJ websites.
Thank you. You had said over the summer that you were working on establishing an oversight committee for the department. Where are you in that process, and when can we expect it will be established?
We have, it took a backseat to COVID. It took a backseat to the things that we were doing because of COVID, the lack of ability to meet anyone in person. I honestly was putting it off as long as possible because I wanted to, because of this whole COVID situation, I really thought it was going to end. And I wanted to be able to get to a position where all of the people that were going to be on it, I wanted a in-person meeting where I could meet with all of these people to make sure that their reasons for wanting to be on this task, on this board were legitimate. That they wanted to make a difference. They wanted to help. They wanted to be a part of a solution, not part of a problem. And unfortunately, it was dragging on too long. So we've identified them. We are in the process of coming up with our rules, our I don't know what you want to call it, just a go by of how we operate, of things that they're going to have to accept, of confidentialities and things like that. And we'll probably be announcing the names within the next couple of weeks. It's still in the process now of a social media gathering instead of a public gathering. So getting everyone scheduled together with with these types of meetings, me sitting down with a virtual meeting with them rather than a face-to-face. It probably within the next couple of weeks, it'll be finalized and we'll get moving with it. And unfortunately, I've had to give in to to this type of a format rather than in person.
Hey, Brandon, Sheriff, again, thank you again for your comments. We're going on 90 minutes now, so if we can go to the last question so that we can have the sheriff go back to his important work that he does on a daily basis. So, Brandon.
Yep, no problem. We'll put in this extra. I know there's some more we did not have time to get to. We will make sure that the sheriff's department receives those, so they can try to address them in their own way. The next one we had on the list was, I've heard you mention that the sheriff's department would be there at the drop of a hat. That being said, as a clinician, I've noticed a large constraining in having a large system in the implementation of adequate changes. How do you adjust smaller city police departments such as San Diego Police Department, I believe is what they were mentioning, who has an active PERT department for psychiatric calls, as compared to Riverside County, who does not have a central call center for psychiatric calls?
That's probably a good question, and probably something that we're going to have to possibly deal with later. But you're almost assuming that just because, and this is no disrespect to the question, but you're assuming that because we don't do something like San Diego, that we're not doing anything. We currently have clinicians that ride with our deputies. So our deputies are, I mean, we get those calls anyway. We get the calls that we know are mental health calls. Sometimes they are routed, or they were in the past, they were routed to the medical aspect rather than the law enforcement side. And that is no longer the case. Because we have clinicians that are riding with our deputies and riding with our police officers, those calls are being sent through our dispatch center to those individual units that are handling those calls. We have a memorandum of understanding between all of the different chiefs in the county, the chiefs of police in the county. We work very, very close together. We work very, very well together, and we are splitting those costs and those efforts to where everybody's taken care of. For instance, Murrieta and Temecula. It may be Murrieta one day that clinician is with, and if there's a call in Temecula, they respond out there. Even though it's Murrieta police, they're going to respond out there and handle that call for service, because that's who the clinician is with that day. RUHS has provided us with enough clinicians that we're able to manage it right now. What we can give, if the board is going to give us more money for deputies that we can dedicate solely to that, then RUHS has said that they will step up and dedicate more mental health clinicians to that end. But right now we actively have resources where if it's a mental health type of a call, it's when all possible, we have clinicians that are responding to those. It's not just a deputy. Now, there is a deputy that responds with them, because I hope no one out there expects a mental health call that someone is just completely irate and their family cannot control them, and they're threatening to kill themselves, and they're threatening to kill their family members, and they're trashing their house. I hope no one expects us to send a mental health clinician to that call and say, hey, go handle that. That's what we are there for. So we are there for that initial part that could be violent, part that may be violent, but the goal is to have that clinician there right with us, so we can hopefully maybe de-escalate, hopefully identify and get the proper help and care that person needs at the time. But we already have that through our own 911 system. Yes, it's not the same as San Diego's, but Riverside County, I think we have a better system. So we're working on it, but that's not to say that we can't improve. I was aware of San Diego's. I don't know of the particulars, but it's something that I could probably look into. And if we can take something away from it, we can probably add to ours to make our system be a little bit more effective.
All right. Thank you, Brandon, for managing the questions to the chat room. Sheriff, on behalf of the Greater Coachella Valley Chamber of Commerce, we want to thank you for spending time with us today, and our members and our business community. Thank you for being so candid on your comments and your responses to the questions that we had. I want to be able to give you some final comments, if you'd like, to the audience, and then I'll go ahead and and conclude the call.
Thank you. As far as final comments, I appreciate our businesses, what you're going through. I appreciate the sacrifices and the almost disasters that you're financially and emotionally and sometimes physically going through right now in these times. I encourage you to keep the fight, keep going. I'm praying for all of our businesses all the time that you're able to survive and you're able to keep going. For our residents out there, the same way. What I would, if I had to give a message, I would like to tell everybody that we are not the rest of the country. What you see on TV, what you see on social media may not be the truth here. It may not be happening here. Don't assume it is. I would like to say, if I had my choice, we're hearing all of the social media about people being banned from social media. If I had my way, I'd take all social media down, because I think that's where it's easy to sit and call people names when we're 200 miles away and there's no chance of being, getting a fat lip or a bloody nose from it. And I think that when we didn't have that, people were a little bit more civil. People were a little bit more respectful. People were a little bit more, in the end, respectful of others' opinions and respectful of others' daily lives. And I think that if we would somehow get back to that and realize that I couldn't care less whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, so why do you care if I am? That doesn't mean we're not real people. I'm a dad. Treat me like a dad. I'll treat you like a dad. Treat me like a husband. I'll treat you like a husband, or a neighbor, and I'll treat you like a neighbor. And I think until we get back to that point where we get out of our tunnel vision about what's in it for me and we start caring about what's in it for everybody, we'll be better off. I think that we're doing very, very well here in Riverside County from a law enforcement perspective, from a government perspective. I think we're doing very well, and we are not a representation of what is happening in the rest of the country. I think we are far better. I think we have residents that are acting better. I think our law enforcement's better, and I think that as long as we realize that, and we realize that one bad person doesn't make an entire organization bad, we'll be able to get past our differences. Know that we do expect some protest maybe coming closer to the inauguration. No different than we expected them the last presidential inauguration, and we had them. But we will make sure that for you, for your residents, and for your businesses, make sure that we are going to ensure that we do our absolute best to keep you safe and keep them peaceful and not let them escalate into something bad.
Thank you, Sheriff. And on behalf of the chamber, thank you again for your time. Want to wish you, your wife Denise, and your family a happy and safe 2021. And we look forward to hopefully connect with you again later this year. To the audience, I want to thank you for joining us today on this call. Thank you for staying on with us a little longer. Again, Sheriff, thank you for staying on a little longer than what was projected.
You're welcome.
We do have our next scheduled town hall on the 25th, when we welcome our college and university leadership from across the valley as part of our Destination Talent Series in partnership with One Future. So again, thank you, everyone. Sheriff, thank you. You be safe, and see you guys on our next town hall.